All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody back to the CCSE Research Conference, Democracy in the Media. You're in for a real treat today for this luncheon. Hope everybody grabbed your food. First thing I'm going to say is to make this an audience interactive session, we encourage everyone to please turn on their webcams. It's always a lot more fun when the presenter can see you and you can see them. So moderating for our luncheon today is Dr. Robert Browning, Director of the C-SPAN Archives and Professor and Faculty Director at the Center for C-SPAN Scholarship and Engagement. Dr. Browning joined the Purdue University faculty in 1981 after receiving his PhD in political science from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. In 1987, he founded the C-SPAN Archives, first at Purdue University and now in its facility at the Purdue University Research Park. In 2010, the Archives won a George Foster Peabody Award for its work in creating the online video library. He teaches and researches congressional procedures, Indiana politics, and television and politics. And in 2010, he was appointed to the Faculty of Communication in addition to his professorship in political science. And he is the author of 6 books featuring research using the C-SPAN Archives. Welcome, Dr. Browning.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and welcome everyone to this no lunch lunch. It's a virtual lunch, so enjoy your own lunch. But we're so delighted to have Howard Mortman with us. He's a fixture around Washington now because of he grew up in the social tweet world and is probably, if you ever find real Howard Mortman, you'll find a panoply of different tweets of what's going on in Washington. But today we're talking about something, and I was going to tell you, Howard, when I was teaching my class the other day, and they came across the chaplain and the prayers, the students said, well, these prayers must be all non-denominational, correct? So what would you tell that student?
That's a really good question. But by the way, let me just say, I know this is lunch, and we are going to end up talking about rabbis. If your lunch is not kosher, that's okay. You can still remain in the audience. So that's a tremendously great question, because the prayers that open each session of Congress are designed to be appealing, available to everybody, to no specific religion. Now, most prayers in Congress, and again, every session of Congress opens with a prayer. Most prayers are delivered by a Christian, by a Christian member of the cloth. But even so, they're supposed to not be divisive. They're supposed to be inclusive of any religion. It just so happens that many of prayers mention Jesus at the end, so it's so even the language themselves can be not divisive, but it can be geared toward a specific denomination. So it's a kind of it's a great question, kind of a tough answer, because they're meant to be non-denominational, but in reality, it doesn't always end up that way.
And so what motivated you to write this book? What interested you so much you would spend the time? We're going to hold up this book here. It's got, when Rabbis Bless Congress, he has studied more than anyone else. When you write a book, you're the expert, and you are clearly the expert in this field of when rabbis speak to Congress. So what was your motivation?
Yeah, it is this book is a sliver of a topic. And it's I will answer that. Let me go backwards by saying no one's done this before, and that's probably the most obvious thing to ever say. No one has ever done a study of rabbis and praying to Congress before. Even broader than that, no one's ever done an academic historical study of prayer in Congress. Many people have opinions whether or not Congress should be praying, but no one's really taken the time to go back and look at the tradition in a historical context geared for congressional junkies. So a couple of things on that. One, it was exciting to be the pioneer to do this sliver of congressional history. So really exciting as a passion project to create a new alley of history research. Also incredibly frightening and daunting to be the first one in the deep end with this, because flat out you have to get it right. If I'm gonna be a novice at this, and I'm University of Maryland, bachelor's degree in the 80s. I have no academic shingle, no academic credential. On the religion side, I flunked out of religious school, so like I'm not a rabbi. I have like zero credentials to be doing any of this. So it just made me want to not just double check, but triple check everything that I do. Because if I am going to create a new alley of history, it has to be right. To answer your original question, why does America need a book about rabbis who pray in Congress? This is, there's two things going on. My job at C-SPAN, I'm the communications director, essentially the PR guy for C-SPAN. As a result of working at C-SPAN, I have on my TV constantly Congress. So right now, the Senate's in. I'm looking over my monitors to my left. The Senate is in, and the House, I believe, is going to gavel in shortly. So Congress is constantly on the screen here. The first thing Congress does in every session is pray. And from the official chaplain, there's a chaplain in the House, a chaplain in the Senate. Both are paid by the government. Both are taxpayer paid positions. They have staff. So it's like a real part of congressional activity. As an intellectual exercise, I was curious, why does Congress do this? Why is there a prayer at the beginning? They pray before the Pledge of Allegiance. Just very literally, it's the first thing they do. They pray when there's a pro forma session. They're in the House, there's a prayer. So intellectually, I was curious about this tradition. On occasion, the official chaplain is not there, and a guest chaplain fills in. Kind of think of Joan Rivers when Johnny Carson was away, and so the guest chaplain would come across and give the prayer and so on. Now that happens on rare occasions. On the rarest of occasions, a rabbi is the guest chaplain who gives the prayer that opens Congress. And that's where my story starts. And that's being Jewish. I just kind of keyed in even more on those few fleeting moments when there's a rabbi opening Congress in prayer. And then it just, I middle of the night, 2:15 in the morning, research of who these rabbis are that pray in Congress. How many are there? What are their stories? And 6.5 years later, a real propeller head driven database on Google Sheets of every rabbi's prayed in Congress and what he or she said. And out of that is the book that Dr. Browning proudly holds up for all the audience here.
And it says here there's 400 rabbis, 600 prayers, and you read all those and found those all in the video library. So how did you go about this?
So the two main points of research, I did not find them all in the video library. Those for whom there is video in the C-SPAN era, I found in the video library. So here are the quick running of the numbers. 434 rabbis have delivered about 40 prayers. Why the difference in numbers? Because about 100 rabbis have given 2 or more prayers in Congress, multiple. They were called back because they did a great job, or for whatever reason they came to do a repeat performance. So of that population, many of them live, and the video can be found in the video library. So my very first point of research was going through the video library from the very beginning, and finding and seeing all the rabbis and what they said. And it has to be said at the very beginning, you have 2 main buckets: those for whom there's video, meaning the C-SPAN video library, and everybody before C-SPAN began. And C-SPAN, as we all know, began in 1979. So any rabbi before then would not be on TV, obviously. And for that, the congressional records. And first rabbi was 1860. That means going through every congressional record backwards and looking for every prayer and trying to figure out who was a rabbi, and then putting that down the ledger.
Wow. Well, Andrea, are we able to show one of these so we can sort of see what we're talking about?
Yeah, I will let Howard tell us which one he would like to pull up.
So let's do, Andrew, here's what I want to do. I'm looking at the list. Let's do, first I'm going to show the oldest, whatever the phrase is, like the oldest video of a rabbi giving prayer. And then coming out of that, and then I'll talk about that. And then out of that, then if we could, that would be number 1, Joshua Haberman, 85. And then coming out of that, Actually, let's go to number 3, Rabbi Reznikov in 2021. So play the first one. Give me a chance to talk about what we're seeing, and then we'll go into the second one, which is the Reznikov 2021. And when you are at your convenience, I'll keep talking to the post, as they say in radio, until you are ready to show that video.
I gotta get the share screen going.
All right, so I'll set this up. You're going to see the earliest video in the C-SPAN video library of a rabbi guest chaplain opening the House of Representatives. Take it away, Andrea.
Washington, D.C.
Creator of all the world, thou who hast turned dust into creatures of intelligence, how wondrous is thy work, how mysterious thy power which brings order out of chaos. Help us to create order in the affairs of man. Thou who hast set limits to the forces of nature to keep all things in marvelous balance, help us to cope with the forces of human nature. Help us distinguish clearly the line between right and wrong, between the interest of the few and the welfare of the many, between the instant gain of today and the larger lasting good of future years. Lead us by thy justice to enact just laws, and by thy mercy to lift up the fallen, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and bring healing to those who suffer. We thank thee for all men and women who uphold the public trust with integrity and lead this nation as faithful servants. May they keep America free, strong, and just. May the Lord grant strength unto his people. May the Lord bless his people with peace. Amen.
Chair has examined the chairman of the last day's proceeding, announced House approval thereof.
Okay, let me do first the substance recap of what you just saw. Then we'll talk about the video library component of that. On the substance side, Rabbi Joshua Haberman of the Washington Hebrew Congregation, one of the largest synagogues in America. In fact, they partnered in the book because the most number of rabbis who have prayed in Congress come from that synagogue, Washington Hebrew Congregation. Rabbi Haberman died about 15 years ago. That was 1985. I think his first prayer was in 1970. That's in the congressional record, not in the video library, obviously. At the end, he invoked what's called the priestly benediction, which is the oldest prayer in the Jewish tradition, goes back to the Book of Numbers and the Torah. So really good substantive prayer. Rabbi Haberman escaped the Holocaust, born in Austria, escaped before the Germans took over, and came to America, became a rabbi, and now prayed in the literal center of democracy. So a good story. On the video library component of this, I was so excited that we have this for a couple reasons. First, you see Tip O'Neill, and it's the only video I have of Tip O'Neill and a rabbi in the video library. So it's just as a political junkie, as a C-SPAN video library junkie, so cool to see O'Neill. It's again the oldest one. Now there are, and Dr. Browning knows this, there are a couple rabbis who prayed before 1985, but after 1979, and the videos don't necessarily exist for those days. So maybe there's about 10 rabbis who are in that gap there. When Dr. Browning is able to unearth that video, you'll make even more people excited. But for now, that's the earliest that I have, and it's so cool to see. And he was, by the way, he was sponsored. I have the video. We don't necessarily have to show it, but Ben Gilman, a Republican congressman from New York, sponsored Rabbi Haberman, and in his remarks, and that's on video too in the video library, he thanked Rabbi Haberman for presiding over his daughter's wedding. It's all politics, isn't it, Dr. Browning? Okay, I want to show now, Andrew, you're going from the oldest video of a rabbi praying in the video library to, this is the Rabbi Reznikov 2021. This is the most current one. And so
hang on.
Okay, so I will wait. I will take your time. For that, we are going to see everybody, the most recent rabbi, Rabbi Arnold Reznikov, who has given the most number of prayers by a rabbi in Congress. They all exist. This is a case they all exist in the video library. I'll let the video play. We'll talk about it.
Almighty God, 20 years ago today, an era ended, pre-9/11 world. Twin Towers stood, no deadly Pentagon attack, no civilian airline passengers crew had sacrificed their lives to protect the Capitol from attack. Next day, our world forever changed. High holy days now challenge Jews worldwide, assess, atone, improve. But regardless of religion, Americans now share holy days blessed by memories of the righteous who kept faith alive. Terrorists did their worst, we responded with our best. Heroes sacrificed, rescued, healed, then we united to rebuild, as we must unite today. Where the Pentagon was struck, we built a chapel, interfaith. Our beliefs attacked, we celebrated unity, diversity, hope. Day's end, leaders gathered on Capitol steps, Democrat, Republican, side by side. Silent prayer, then God bless America, they sang. May unity then inspire us now, heeding America's liberty song. Join hand in hand, brave Americans all. By uniting we stand, by dividing we fall. And may we say, Amen.
Okay, great. Thank you, Angie, for playing that. A couple things coming out of that. Rabbi Arnold Resnikoff holds the record for most number of prayers by a rabbi in Congress at 18. 18 is significant in the Jewish tradition. Numerically, 18 spells out the word chai, which is life. Rabbi Resnikoff, wore a tie that had the word chai all over it, and marking his 18th prayer in Congress. 10 in the House, 8 in the Senate, many of them in pro forma sessions. We have every video of his in the video library. He's become a dear friend of mine, by the way, through this project. And here's where it gets really fun to bring the video library into this, both for Rabbi Haberman and for Rabbi Resnikoff. These prayers in Congress are not the only time that they show up in the video library. For Rabbi Haberman, Joshua Haberman, who we saw at the beginning, he shows up in other events out of Congress, and which is fun to, just as an amateur researcher, to go down the rabbit hole of the video library. Rabbi Haberman spoke on September 14th, 2001 at the National Cathedral at the National Day of Prayer after the terror attacks 9/11. And Rabbi Haberman, who we saw first, gave a prayer at the cathedral in 3 days after 9/11. Rabbi Resnikoff, who we just saw now, has spoken at many other events that are in the C-SPAN video library. The 9/11 connection, you heard, that prayer was given 3 or 4 weeks ago on September 10th, the night before September 11th. So that's his connection to that. But if you search him in the video library, among many gems that come up for Rabbi Resnikoff, he gave the closing prayer, the benediction, in 1982 at the Vietnam Veterans of War Memorial dedication in Washington, D.C. And it was Senator John Warner and other dignitaries. And here comes Resnikoff, who fought in Vietnam, who fought in the Mekong Delta as a soldier. He gives the prayer at the wall, and we have that in the video library. So that made it, that gave me some structure, some fun additional things to put into the book in addition to that prayer. So,
Howard, I actually have a question.
Go ahead.
How did you do your searches? Like, how did you find these rabbis? Because I'm pretty sure that the spell check wasn't always quite correct on names and stuff. So I want to know how you did to overcome that. And our researcher here too, to know how'd you overcome it?
That's a great question, and I there's a lot of fun texture to answer that. I'll tell you flat out. First of all, we get the names wrong, and this is not a video library thing. On screen, the graphics are wrong. My own rabbi in my synagogue, Temple Road of Shalom in Virginia, Rabbi Laszlo Berkowitz, a survivor of Auschwitz and the Holocaust, gave the prayer, and we misspelled his name on screen in 1988. So there's a lot of there's a lot of things like that that you need to overcome. It's both. It's funny. It's both in one way, it's the easiest search of all, because every session of Congress begins with a prayer. So I need to go, if I know going in who I'm looking for, then I know, if I look at September 10th, 2021, I know that Reznikov will be there because he gave the prayer in the House. So it's like clockwork that all these will be in the video library. But, and this is not a video library thing, as you say, they could be misnamed. There could be any number of reasons why they're not found. One of the most frustrating reasons has nothing to do with C-SPAN, has everything to do with being Jewish. A lot of times these rabbis are not identified as rabbis. And I'll give you an example. Military chaplains who are rabbis are identified as rabbis. I'm sorry, are identified as chaplains, not identified as rabbis. So I go in knowing who I'm looking for, because even if I were to search Rabbis Congress, Rabbis House of Representatives, yes, many of them will show up, but it won't be every one of them. It'll be a good chunk of them. Won't be one. Another quirk to this whole research is, this is again as on us as Jews, is that for a long time they weren't called rabbis; they were called reverends and ministers. That was a Jewish thing. So if you go through the congressional record till like 1940s, Reverend Stein, gave the prayer, and that doesn't do me anything. I can't search rabbi that way, so I need to go in. I go in looking for that. But I love that question, because I've done a lot of tough searches, tough in the video library, meaning tough, not the video library is bad, but just, to really find stuff that are completely hidden. Most of these rabbis are praying are not hidden because they exist at the beginning of each Congress video.
Who else has a question for Howard, that something that either about these rabbis or about how he went about this project? Carly?
Hi, Howard. I'm curious if you found any changes over time in how these rabbis perform their prayers, or if over time it stays the same, you find commonalities, differences. It kind of taps into some papers that were in the next session. I'd like to hear about changes in behavior over time and adaptations.
Carly, that's such a great question, and I'm not going to. I don't want to go too much. I will answer that. It gets me a little bit away from the video library component, but to answer your question, yes, the flat out answer is yes. One of the joys, the treasures of going through, seeing the video, seeing the congressional record transcript of these prayers, is how they have changed and how they've evolved. And that's for one big reason, is because the House rules and the Senate rules on what a guest chaplain can say has changed. So for instance, when a guest chaplain of any denomination shows up and gives a prayer, he or she is given rules by the official chaplain of things you can and cannot say. For instance, they can't talk about legislation. They're there to pray. They're not there to lobby. They don't vote. They can't speak in foreign languages, which is new. And in fact, Andrea, I might show a video shortly of a foreign language being used, and I'll cue that up for you in a second. Don't worry. So like there used to be a lot of rabbis prayed in Hebrew, or gave prayers in Hebrew, and you can't do that anymore. Is a rule from the Senate and the House. You can't talk about, a couple of these rules kind of strike home to a rabbi. You can't use a foreign language. You can't talk about a foreign country. Have a rabbi who gave me the rules that were sent to him in '78 when he was a guest chaplain in the Senate, and it said no foreign language, no foreign countries. And for him, it smacked of a little bit too putting the thumbs on the scale for a rabbi to be given those kind of rules. The substance of the prayers have definitely evolved, and one of the great things about this is that you see the connection to history. As America, even though you can't talk about legislation, you definitely, these prayers, and again, not just rabbis, but everybody, reflects what's going on in American history at that moment. A lot of prayers, 12% of the prayers that I found occurred during the Vietnam War. And you can see the language of America coming out in these prayers in the 60s, early 60s, beginning of the Vietnam War. A lot of the rabbis incorporated very language in the prayers that said, we are praying for the success. A lot of them said over communism, a lot of the success of our troops over communism. In the early 70s, the prayers then reflected American changing attitudes and started saying we need to bring our boys home and address all the needs we have at home, social and societal needs. You see that in the prayers. So yes, that's one of the beauties of this is you do get to see the changing language. Andrea, I'm going to queue up if I could. Actually, I will. Can I queue up number 4? This is Rabbi Maurice Lyons of St. Louis of 1994, and this goes into a couple of it kind of answers Carly's question a little bit more, and I can talk a little bit more in depth about this. So I'm going to talk to the poster. You're going to see video of Rabbi Maurice Lyons of St. Louis in 1994 give the Senate prayer, and I will discuss this on the other side.
Sitting will be in order. Today's prayer will be offered by guest chaplain Rabbi Maurice Lyons, St. Louis, Missouri.
Our Father of the arching heavens and undulating earth, ruling in sublimity from the evolution of the first amoeba to the glorious emergence of man, from the morning mist burst of time to its endless mystical haze, thou art eternal, and all creation palpitates to thine imprint. While thy rulership holds eternal sway over the universe, we, thy transitory children, can but exercise dominion over a small portion of this planet, thy footstool. Ever since the founding of our beloved country, have we Americans permeated by thy teaching throughout our government for the benefit of all our citizens. And to this end have we selected for regnancy those leaders whom we felt would embrace thine exhortation of love, mercy, and brotherhood. And standing in the effulgence of thy Shekhinah, I feel uplifted by the presence of this august body, the finest of all legislative instruments in supplication to thee. I pray that thou render sharp and universal the wisdom of our esteemed senators, and that it reach therapeutically across party lines and political differences to our common bedrock American heritage. In the reverential language of King Solomon to the God of Israel, I too humbly pray, grant, O Lord, to each of our beloved senators a discerning heart to understand between right and wrong. May their speech, and above all action, reflect the altruism and glory of the founders of our great country. And in conclusion, I rejoice in pronouncing over this esteemed legislative body the ancient priestly benediction. Yevarecha ad Hashem yishmerecha, Yoel ad Hashem panav elecha v'chunecha, Yisur ad Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he lift up his countenance unto you and grant you peace. Peace of heart, peace of mind, peace in all the paths that you may tread, now and forever. Amen.
Okay, so a couple things in this video, at a very practical level of why the video is so important and why the treasure that is a C-SPAN video library. This is one of my favorite prayers. A couple things happening here. He puts his arms over the Senate as if it's a sanctuary, as if it's inside the synagogue, and blessing the audience, which is flat out, you can't see that in congressional record. You can only see that in the video, which is why the video is so critical for this project. It's a beautiful prayer. He ends, he actually cites the same prayer that we saw at the beginning, our first video, Rabbi Haberman, 1985, the priestly benediction, the oldest prayer in the Jewish tradition. He says that as well. He says it in Hebrew, a lot of Hebrew going on. Again, Mortman said earlier he can't speak Hebrew anymore. So the rules now, you can't speak a foreign language, but you could back then. I don't know when or what motivated and why that was changed. But there's a lot of Hebrew going on. Another value, by the way, of the video for the research, he's wearing the yarmulke. You saw the yarmulke on top, something you cannot see. You can figure out from the congressional record who's religious and not, but you can flat out see the yarmulke. So if that's the value of the video library, and to answer, going back kind of to Carly's question earlier, I found it to be very rich language about America and about the Senate, and just for me it was a very substantive kind of prayer that a lot of the prayers I came across reflected that, just like a belief in the Senate, belief in America, a love of America, and so on. One very personal note about that prayer, as part of my research, I put all these prayers now available online, the video library. I clipped them all and so on. This Rabbi Maurice Lyons, gave the prayer in 94. He died, I believe, a couple years later, maybe 96 or 97. Last year, I got a note out of the blue. So I had put all these prayers mechanically, just clipped them all as part of the research so they exist. I got a note from his family. It was the anniversary of his death. In the Jewish tradition, that's called a yahrzeit. So the yahrzeit is every year the marking someone's death. You light a candle, you do prayers, and so on. Well, Rabbi Maurice Lyons, it was his yahrzeit, the anniversary of his death. The family was Googling him and came across this prayer as a result of their Googling him. And they sent me a note. They found me and sent me a note. They said, we had no idea that he ever prayed in Congress, or ever prayed in the Senate. They had never seen this video before. For the kids, for the grandkids, they'd never even heard the grandfather's voice before. So it was an incredible moment. They were thrilled to get this video. I was more thrilled because I hadn't made that personal connection before with a family like that. So it really meant a lot to me, getting me outside the mechanical of documenting every prayer to actually a real personal connection with a family like that. And it still remains one of my favorite prayers, just to see him raising his hand over the Senate like that.
Joshua, you want to go ahead and ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. And I think this builds from the conversation generally, Howard, but certainly stop if it's beyond the scope of what you've done with this project. And first and foremost, thanks for everything you do with C-SPAN and your work. It's a fascinating conversation. I like that story. So I'm curious. So a lot of my research delves into like power relationships and how structures either stay in place or don't. And I know there's this underbelly of like separation of church and state within the country, but that very rarely comes into fruition, and oftentimes actually might get politicized by a certain political party in a certain moment because they feel like the other party is being too religious or not religious enough. As you're noting some of these changes to the rules or the procedural rules for how a benediction can happen, do you ever find that it's reactive to say, I mean, recently there's been an unfortunate uptick in anti-Jewish rhetoric, right, in our political climate, or I'm thinking after 9/11, are persons within Islamic tradition not allowed to speak? I mean, are there changes to the rules that are reactive, that attempt to keep kind of Christianity in the center and these other vibrant religions in the periphery?
That's such a marvelous question. There's a lot wrapped up. Because there's a lot wrapped up into that. I'm going to answer that coming from a different direction. I get this. So I'm going to, being Jewish, I've talked about this book to Jewish audiences, and they're very. So it's in a way like the back of your mind, as much as you say, well, this is interesting, the fear as a Jewish American is always they're trying to Christianize the nation by doing this, because I mean, flat out, most of these prayers are Christian and so on. So what my answer to that is, the book, by the way, and the book itself does not, I mean, church state looms over all this. I mean, it's clear. Why are they praying in Congress? And I can talk about this and at the end people say, well, Mortman, I get it. I understand the history, but I still don't like it, so people still may not like the practice. A couple things. The Supreme Court has ruled on prayer in legislative bodies repeatedly over the years, and has repeatedly held up the tradition because it goes back to the very beginning of Congress, the Continental Congress. First thing they did was hire a chaplain. So this tradition is rooted deepest into the American practice of democracy. So the Supreme Court, for that reason, has always upheld it. This is not a church-state book. I don't get into that. That's an argument for others to engage in. But what my point of what I did in this book was to say, there are over 400 rabbis who have given over 600 prayers. I want to learn the history of that. I want to know who they are and what they said. And to say, well, I don't like the fact that they did it at all. You're allowed to have that. That's a fine opinion. But for me, that ignores really fascinating history just to be dismissive of the practice and not going to who did it. In a bigger picture than all that is, for me, it goes even to the Establishment Clause, that it's tough to argue that Christianity is the established religion of America when you can write a book about 400 rabbis who have prayed in Congress, in the literal center of democracy. So, I mean, for me, the book itself is an argument against that, against saying this is a Christian nation. So that's the only time I'm kind of going, being C-SPAN, I don't offer an opinion, but it's the only time I really say, well, just watch the research. Now, Joshua, going a little closer to your question, some of these chaplains, guest chaplains who have prayed, have been controversial. There have been Muslims, imams who have prayed, Hindus have prayed in Congress, Native Americans have prayed. One of the rabbis who was in the book, she was giving the prayer in the House, and just coincidentally on the same day, I think it was a Hindu giving a prayer in the Senate, and the Hindu got yelled at from the gallery, the Hindu priest, and there's a disturbance in the gallery. They had to stop his prayer because I think it was a Hindu, it might not have been, but saying you're not a true religion, you're a fake religion. So there's actually got heckling going on during this prayer. And again, that's thanks to the library, the video for that. So yeah, the practice on its own, the big picture practice always will remain controversial. Atheists have sued against the practice. They can't sued saying that you can't mention God in it, in these prayers. But just in a bigger sense, I don't, to go to your question was like restrictions. I wouldn't say restrictions, but the practice has not been without controversy. Well, the biggest one is you can't have politics play a role in what you say. These are flat out supposed to be prayers. That's not always in practice what happens. In practice, yes, they get up there, and Chaplain Black, for instance, famously 7 years ago, he's Chaplain Barry Black of the Senate, official chaplain. It was during one of the budget crises, and he said basically every one of his prayers for a week invoked the budget. Father Conroy, who was the chaplain of the House before that, before the current one, got so upset by how much acrimony and hatred there was in the chamber that he did almost like an exorcism, put his hands over the chamber, and he said, "Cast out evil spirits in the house." So that was kind of a famous one. That was about 2 years ago. So yeah, so there have been moments when it becomes noticeable. I don't say controversial, but noticeable what they're doing on these prayers.
And go ahead.
I was just say thank you for the answer there, and it seemed like the previous rabbi we've watched, he said something like from the first amoeba to the time that man. I mean, that's not apolitical, right? I mean, that seems like a more covert political message. So I like that you've kind of made that distinction, and also just that I guess I wondered, does that usage of Hebrew, say in that one, does that prompt Congress to remove foreign languages from the prayer, or have you not found that correlation to exist?
Well, no. So I think, yeah, I don't hear Hebrew anymore. In fact, I find in the congressional record from the 50s and the 60s, not just, I find the transcript what they said using Hebrew, if they speak Hebrew in their prayer, the Hebrew shows up in the congressional record, which is mind blowing to see Hebrew lettering in the congressional record there, in the transcription, in the type. So no, I think since the House and Senate have pretty much put the kibosh on foreign language, you don't hear Hebrew. It's been a while. Now there are people who say, well, the word amen is a Hebrew word, or even hallelujah is a Hebrew word, both of which are said now, but I think they're so commonly used that it's not, you can't claim ownership of that being a Hebrew word. So yeah, in the older days, you probably saw a lot more Hebrew than you do now, just because the rules have changed.
All right, very good. Who else has a question? Howard, if we searched Howard Mortman in the video library, what would we find?
We would find the following. We would find, well, here's what you would find. You would find one or two appearances on the Washington Journal before I was with C-SPAN. When I was with the Hotline, which is a daily publication, political publication. But more important, what you would find a couple appearances at the DC Improv, the comedy club here in DC. And in 1998, I participated one of several times in the DC Funniest Celebrity Contest at the DC Improv. And this is how politics in DC works. I'm gonna give you guys the inside scoop here. So I was on stage at the Improv. C-SPAN covered it. It's in the video library. Extra credit to the teachers who can find my performance there. This is 20 years before I landed in my job here at C-SPAN. So I do a lot of, unknowing what the future would hold, I do a lot of C-SPAN jokes, which killed. But the winner, and you can find this in the library, of the DC Funniest Celebrity Contest in 1998 was Joe Lieberman, which upset me because I thought that he used a lot of jokes written by his staff. And I'm not bitter, not that I remember any of this. And I remember also that he did the classic DC delivery of a joke where you have cards and you say, oh, I've got another funny joke. Then you read it off the card and then you put your hands up in celebration after you do the joke. Now, but I have nothing but admiration for Senator Joseph Lieberman because he's on the back cover of my book here as praising the book here somewhere under this backwards. So I've come full circle. I think he's now just a great person who tells the funniest jokes ever. And the evidence of that is because he has endorsed my book here.
Catherine, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This has been such an interesting talk. But my question is actually not about your book or your research, but about your work at C-SPAN. And I'm wondering if you could kind of talk about what it means to be a communications director at C-SPAN, what your goals are. And I ask this because I have spent a lot of time looking at the C-SPAN archives that are at George Mason University. And one of the things that really jumps out to me about those archives is how well documented all of the public conversations that were happening, all of the publicity, all the media coverage that was happening about C-SPAN, and that it was then, compiled in really effective ways and to remind cable operators about the important work that C-SPAN is doing in the ways that it was valued. And I was really struck by how well documented those communications efforts were. And I'm wondering if that is part of your job today and what the goal of those of that is, or the mission might be.
Yeah, Catherine, thank you for asking that. A couple things on that. It's kind of my position, my job is kind of a weird one because I do media outreach for a media organization. So it's, ultimately, because we've been around for 40 plus years, a key part of what I do and what my colleagues in the communications department do is stay in front of the public, stay in front of the media, in front of both consumers and the media level, reporters level, as well as the general public. And that's for relevancy, that's for reputation, that's for just, reminding people, everybody, we love, as a society, we love things that are new. We love shiny, brand new objects to look at. We are not that, but we have a lot of really cool, great things that we can keep on offering to American people and to the audience. So my job, in the big sense, not the day-to-day what do I do, but what is all this for? It's to remain in front of America, that we exist, and at the core level, we have video for them to consume and for them to be aware of. And you all know the mission of what C-SPAN does. So I'll take it one level below that. On it more of like what my goals are. My goal is day to day to do two big things: work with reporters and to help continue to tell the C-SPAN story. And you do that whether it's through corporate projects, corporate initiatives, or just the day to day of what we're covering. When, for instance, coming up, when the Colin Powell funeral details will come out. I want to get that in front of reporters because I want them watching C-SPAN, when they're watching the Colin Powell funeral, for instance. So two main vehicles for that. One to business to business, one-on-one contact with reporters, saying, here's what we're doing, here's what we're showing, here's video that can help you in your job. Or complementary to that is social media. It's sharing our video through our social media platforms. Now, it's really interesting because I love, as Dr. Browning said this at the beginning, I love Twitter. I think Twitter is a great vehicle to get, it's not necessarily, I'll leave it to you experts, whether it's a good, it's been a net plus or minus for democracy. But in terms of a vehicle to get out messaging, it's wonderful. And I can share C-SPAN video all the time. Colin Powell yesterday, his death, 5, 6, 7 different tweets of video that we have in the video library. And the purpose of that is to show reporters and the public use our resources to create your own story. Here's the raw video. You can create your own narrative around this. As a company, these social media platforms are critical to get in front of millions of members of the audience single-handedly with our relevancy. I have to say, and I love that, Catherine, that you're looking at all this. I have to tell you, I'll circle back to the video library here, that the video library it's like, for me, it's a magic story machine. You can really plug in anything you want, anything news happening that day, and out comes 5, 6, 7 hundreds of different videos, and you can create your own story about it. Colin Powell yesterday, well, here's Colin Powell contemplating running for president in 1995 when he's doing his book tour. So you can create your own narrative and storylines. There's something magical about it that I just love. And I will say this, when you find a video on YouTube and you share it, you're sharing what someone else has already found. It's still exciting. It's still a neat moment to share something else. But when you find your own moment in the video library, your own eureka moment of here's a video that no one's ever seen before, it's even more special and more exciting for that because no one has seen it before and no one has clipped it before. So okay, going bigger again to your question, my big picture job is to share that enthusiasm for our video, for our product with as many people as possible.
A follow-up, that's a terrific answer, thank you. And do you share curated clips or do you share like a longer version, or do you kind of decide what you think is important for reporters to know?
That, Catherine, there's a lot that's great about that question because, that goes in, because you get C-SPAN writ large, gavel to gavel, full coverage. We don't edit, we let you form your own decisions. Then you end up with 8-hour hearings. So like, what do you do with that? Like, how do you get social media world of clips into that 8-hour, to the long format? So the answer is you cheat. You actually clip what you think is interesting, but you then link to the full video. So it's what our routine practice for the main C-SPAN Twitter account is to always say, here's a 2-minute, 3-minute, 4-minute clip. But here is the link to the full video. So we kind of do both at that. There's no way we can get people every day to say, here's a great 8-hour hearing and go knock yourself out. There are moments that I'm a political junkie. There are things that I look for that in a way, maybe it's like intellectually, I'm editing a little bit, not in a partisan way, but editing for what I think personally is interesting. And then I'll clip that minute or two out of it and share it. So my followers on Twitter know you're getting something historical, something connected to that day's events, but with an historical perspective. From the main account, which is more important, you're getting that clip plus the full video. Then you can go in and look for yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you, Howard, at the beginning, I said that my students thought that it should be non-denominational. Do you hold out hope that there will ever be a rabbi chaplain?
Okay, so here's the deal. It's not me hoping. There are rabbis who I met as a result of this project who hope there is a rabbi chaplain because rabbis themselves have angled to become the official chaplain. And I know firsthand because a rabbi has told me that this rabbi, and I won't name names, you've seen his video, but I won't name names, has wanted to be the official chaplain when there is a rare vacancy. So yes, do I think it's going to happen? I would say whatever the answer is to the question, do I think there's going to be cameras in the Supreme Court one day? It would probably be the same answer to the question, will there ever be a rabbi official chaplain? Now, concurrent with that, to be called up to Congress to give a prayer, to do the gig, is a huge honor. And it's not necessarily a rabbi's thing, it's to be a guest chaplain of, there was a Lutheran priest who gave the prayer on Friday. That, and this priest has given the prayer many times. So, it's a huge deal to be able to have that shingle. Rabbis and the priests and others who have done the prayer put it on their LinkedIn page. They share it on Facebook. They share the YouTube of it, and so on. So, I don't know if there's ever going to be a rabbi official chaplain in our lifetime, but you never know. It's a very mysterious business, isn't it, Dr. Browning?
It is, and the members often stand up and speak about the rabbi or the guest chaplain. They sort of take credit in a sense for bringing that person to the Congress.
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind, Andrea, can I call up on that point? One thing, a big element to this, and this is number 2 video. This is only a minute long. This is, I mentioned this earlier. This is the Ben Gilman sponsoring Rabbi Haberman video number 2, 1985. I'll mention this, and I'll look to you for the cues on the timing. So this goes back. So what Dr. Browning is referring to is, you don't just show up and knock on the door and say, I want to be a guest chaplain. Somebody has to sponsor you. So thank you, Andrea. We'll let this play here. This is not from 1985.
Members will clear the well. House will be in order.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentlemen from New York.
address the House and revise and extend my remarks. Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in welcoming Rabbi Joshua O. Haberman of Washington as our guest chaplain. Rabbi Haberman is a distinguished clergyman from the Washington region, where he served as senior rabbi of the Washington Hebrew congregation for the past 16 years. Rabbi Haberman was born in Austria, began his studies at the University of Vienna, but was forced to continue his education following the Nazi invasion in the United States at the University of Cincinnati and the Hebrew College in Cincinnati. Rabbi Haberman has served congregations in Mobile, Alabama, in Buffalo, New York, and in Trenton, New Jersey. He was awarded an honorary degree of Doctor of Divinity by the Hebrew Union College and has received numerous other awards as well. In addition to his work as a professor, an author, lecturer, he's long been a leader in interfaith activities. On behalf of my colleagues, I'm honored to welcome Rabbi Haberman to our chamber today, to thank him for his eloquent prayer, and to reiterate my appreciation for officiating at my recent marriage to Rita Gale.
So, Andrea, can we actually, do you mind? I want to bump right into another one really fast. This is video number 8. This is, and forgive me for calling it inaudible here. This is the Chuck Schumer and Rabbi Buttman video number 8, Andrea, if you can pull that up. And I'll, as you are working on that. So what we just saw was Ben Gilman, 1985. That's the earliest video that I have of a sponsor of a rabbi. I want to show you when Andrea's ready. Video number 8, Chuck Schumer and Rabbi Buttman. Here you go. Now watch this, everybody. Watch this. Get a load of this one. Here you go.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce to the House Rabbi Shmuel Buttman, the director of the Lubavitch Youth Organization. Many of my colleagues are already familiar with the good work done by Chabad Lubavitch. Rabbi Buttman visits us shortly after the 90th birthday of the spiritual leader of this movement, Grand Rabbi Menachem Schneerson. Rabbi Schneerson leads the Lubavitch community from my hometown, Brooklyn, New York, but his followers fill every corner of the globe. Millions have benefited from his charitable works and have been inspired by his words and his writing. Congress has recognized Rabbi Schneerson's accomplishments on many occasions, but this, his 90th year, takes on special significance. As we reflect on the prayer offered by Rabbi Buttman, I hope my colleagues will also reflect on the importance of religious faith and education and how much we can learn from the Lubavitch movement, its devout members, and their great leader.
Okay, Andrea, you're going to kill me. Can I do one more? I know we're running out of time, but and it just occurred to me, and I want to talk about this. Can you also show number 6, Rabbi Dina Feingold, the Kenosha video, and I will talk about that one as you are calling that up. The reason why, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll take your cue after this. It occurred to me, everything we've shown here so far have been male rabbis and male sponsors. So we may not have time. We can if we just show a minute of this, that's fine too. We'll let this play.
Order. Today's prayer will be offered by a guest chaplain, Rabbi Dina A. Feingold of Beth Hillel Temple, Kenosha, Wisconsin, who is also the sister of the junior senator from Wisconsin.
Let us pray. Source of wisdom, well of justice, fountain of goodness and of peace, we praise you for pouring your Spirit upon humanity as we struggle feebly to fashion our society into the kind of world you have envisioned. We cherish your guidance as we strive to bring peace, harmony, and equity to this world in which we are your partners. As these elected officials begin another day of deliberation in the United States Senate, we pray that your presence may dwell among them. Enable them to discern and to acquire but a minute portion of your wisdom and compassion, your knowledge of what is just and right, as they carry out the awesome task of governing our great nation. Grant them insight and endurance as they consider the weighty issues facing our country. Endow them with deep concern for one another, for their constituents, for the people of this nation, and indeed of the entire world. Give them courage to take the difficult stands and to ask the hard questions which must be asked in order to bring wholeness to our broken world. With grateful hearts do we stand before you, framer and fashioner of all that is right and just, for the privilege of living in this land of freedom, where the spirit of goodness is felt keenly by so many. Eternal power of the universe, author of freedom, to you we offer thanks and praise, and let us say, Amen.
Okay, so Andrea, I promise no more videos, no more scaring moments here. Thank you for those. A quick footnote to that video you saw at the beginning. Dr. Browning, let me call on you, Dr. Browning. Who was it that introduced Rabbi Dina Feingold to the Senate? Who was that?
The junior senator from Wisconsin, Senator Russ Feingold.
That's right, Senator Russ Feingold, the brother of the rabbi. By the way, Rabbi Feingold is still at that synagogue in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and during the civil disturbances a year ago in Kenosha, she was frequently quoted. The synagogue was defaced with anti-Semitic graffiti, so she was very much still in the news then. Introduced by her brother. Of the 434 rabbis who prayed in Congress, 15 are women. Only one woman there's only one woman who's done the prayer twice. Rabbi Hannah Spiro of a synagogue here in DC. The first rabbi to pray in Congress, a woman, was Rabbi Sally Prezand, who prayed in Congress in the House in October 14th, 1973, I believe. And two things, Rabbi Sally Prezand, the first woman rabbi to pray in Congress in 73, was also the first woman rabbi ordained in America in 1972. And a year later, she prayed in Congress. She was in her 20s. Two things about Rabbi Sally Prezand, the first woman rabbi in Congress. She was from New York, sponsored by Bella Abzug, Congresswoman from New York. In her prayer, Rabbi Sally Prezand never mentions that she's the first woman, but Bella Abzug mentions it over and over and over that she is the first woman rabbi. And here's a little asterisk for you researchers out there. Rabbi Sally Prezand, the first woman rabbi in Congress, 1973. Last name spelled Priesand. The Congressional Record gets her name wrong. They misspell her name. They put it Preisand, which is both the ultimate ignominy for the first woman rabbi and making it tougher, elusive for researchers to find her prayer in the Congressional Record. But I can't blame that video library because it all predates C-SPAN. So
you can see this is where they start playing the music.
I want to thank the rabbis for that.
And let's give Howard a round of applause here for a very thoughtful and insightful and deep knowledge of his subject. Brian always says, you write a book, you're the expert on that, and you can see here we've got the expert. Thank you so much, Howard.
You've been a great crowd, everybody. Shalom.